Welcome to Startup Stories, where we go behind the scenes of some of the most interesting and innovative tech startups in the world. Each episode will bring you in-depth interviews with entrepreneurs and business leaders sharing their personal stories on success, failure, and everything in between. So whether you're an entrepreneur yourself or someone that's just generally interested in the world of startups, then Startup Stories is the perfect place for you to gain insight and inspiration into some of the most exciting players in the game. So sit back, relax, and join us on a journey of startup stories. Daniel, welcome to Startup Stories podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So for the audience, could you give them a brief introduction into who you are?
Absolutely. My name's Daniel Hanemann. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. My dad's German. My mom's from Taiwan. And with 18, I moved to Germany, studied business, and have been in the startup world ever since.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction. I was always also curious where the slight American accent comes from. Did you go to in international school?
I went to German-Swiss international school in Hong Kong. So yeah, it's the international school accent. So my writing is completely in British English, or the vocabulary, but you know, Hollywood movies influence that accent. Yeah.
So Daniel, I want to really get to understand who you are. You've achieved great things with Wundertax, but let's roll it right back to your earliest memory. Can you give me an idea of what that looks like?
The very earliest memory was probably so it's interesting because you know how earliest memories work. A lot of the times it's influenced and you think it's your earliest memory, but the one I think it is, at least, is the very earliest was me being at the beach with my parents and not understanding. And I think it was somewhere in Southeast Asia where they were like having like salt fields, and my toddler brain did not comprehend that the water was salty because of natural causes, and they were just like farming the salt out of the water. But I got mad because I thought that they were pouring the salt into the water. So that is, I think, the very first memory that I have.
Brilliant. I could totally understand why you would think that as a toddler as well, if you've never had the understanding the concept of the sea.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. So, okay, let's dive even more deeper into your childhood then. So you grew up in Hong Kong, is that right, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So
all through 18.
Okay. So take me back to your childhood then. What was life like growing up in Hong Kong?
It was very interesting because I had a mixed childhood, culturally speaking. So my mom being from Taiwan, she spoke perfect Cantonese, but I didn't. I spoke Mandarin with her. I mean, it's when I meet people from Hong Kong and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, let's speak Cantonese." Like I kind of have to disappoint them because I speak Mandarin with a very Taiwanese accent as well. So growing up in Hong Kong, we had that expat lifestyle. So we had a little bit of an expat bubble, but I was very much in touch with the local culture. So we went to local restaurants, went to local markets. With my mom, we spoke Mandarin together. In Hong Kong, basically everyone understands Mandarin to a certain degree and or English. But so we could communicate. So we were there, part of the society. But at the same time, I went to German school, had a lot of contact with expat kids. My dad working for a German company. Of course, we also had a lot of contact with, the German community. So growing up in Hong Kong was culturally very confusing. But at the same time, it was very, very rewarding because you were very much in, the hotspot of Asia. Like going through the years, the handover from the UK to China and seeing all the developments also of recent years and to have, both the Western perspective and the Chinese perspective is just very rewarding, not just to have a political opinion, but also personally yeah.
Your parents, so your father is from Germany and your mom from Taiwan.
Exactly.
Do you carry either of their traits?
I'd say so, yeah. So my girlfriend is from like she's originally from Serbia. She moved to Germany when she was 10. And she does say like, okay, I feel like even though we speak German together, like she says a lot of times, I feel like you have those Asian like cultural traits, which is very interesting to me, because like I don't consciously say like, okay, this is my Asian trait or anything. I carry traits, yeah. I carry traits from both the cultures. I carry personal traits of theirs as well. I'd say my mom can be very headstrong, but also, and this is maybe a bit more of an Asian trait, very much like community, like, there's a longing for harmony between people, Mm-hmm. At the same time, the German, pragmatism, I would say I do carry that with me as well.
A lot of people say like when they're like a CEO, founder, whatever it may be in business, that some of their biggest influences started off very, very early in their lives without even knowing sometimes. Can you think of a big influence in your life?
Yeah, I always felt like, my parents weren't entrepreneurs. They didn't, my dad was a manager at Metro, which is in the UK is Macro. As a sourcing manager, my mom was a Chinese tutor, but they were both very entrepreneurial when it came like they were also always on the lookout for buying properties for us moving in, but then also flipping, etc. So I would say for my like what did form me was a lot that entrepreneurial thinking and that mindset that anything is possible if you set your mind to it. At the same time, we spent every summer in Germany. My mom and dad sent me off to summer camp every year, probably because they wanted 2 weeks of peace and quiet. But it was very what I found extremely rewarding about that was, growing up with expat kids, a lot of them being parents being managers or bankers or in that area. So it's all very wealthy. Going to summer camp with like, kids of bakers and policemen and everything, giving me that other perspective. I think I'm very thankful that my parents did that. They sent me off to this summer camp, which was, with local kids from the country. My dad's from the countryside in Germany. It's near Switzerland, the Black Forest area, and sending me to this with it sounds very bougie, but like normal people, normal kids, just gave me, I would say, that level of empathy to be able to relate to the problems that, now to bring it back to startup, the problems that our customers face, and not just have that perspective of like, oh, I'm the visionary founder, the customers should like what I do, but to actually have that level of empathy to be like, no, the customers or the users probably stumble upon this problem. They probably want this, So I'd say, yeah, I attribute a lot of the entrepreneurial prowess to my upbringing, definitely.
Yeah, I can see that. Like you say, going to these camps, it gave you a different perspective, which is, of course, what you need to have in mind when you're starting a business. Can't all just be what you think. It's ultimately the audience, the customers, the end users. Okay, so you told me that you lived in Hong Kong up to the age of 18. Talk to me about that moment where you're now moving to Germany.
Yeah.
Or where, yeah, cool.
Being 18, you think you're invincible. I went, I thought I knew Germany. I thought, I spent there every summer there by, like culturally, like I know what's going on. But like actually moving to Germany, and I went to WHU, which is in this small town close to Koblenz, which is a small city between Frankfurt and Cologne. It was a culture shock. Like, even a lot of students back then had a difficult time, like getting accustomed to being at uni, accustomed to, the workload of university, etc., whilst I had to deal with, being just 18, living by myself. Most of them had their parents within, like a 3-hour range of stuff. My parents were halfway across the world. So, I, additionally to all the stress from university, like had to deal with having my own household, having to take care of myself completely from zero, and at the same time, also the cultural shock of being like, in Germany with people that came from, with like Germans who came from the countryside and never seen an Asian person before, like, or at least like outside of a restaurant context, have never seen an Asian person before, it was challenging, like at the beginning, like going to Germany, having to deal with all those big changes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What did it teach you?
I'd say resilience. In the first year of university, I did very badly. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I did it quite badly. I didn't really want to continue at university. I went to, the university career office and told them about my problems and didn't want to continue. But, my dad said, look, nobody's going to ask you about your grades when you get out of university, which turned out to be very true. Back then, though, you think like, oh my God, like I'm never going to make it because my grades are bad, which is ridiculous. But, my dad said, like, get it together. The university was also very helpful. I started doing a lot of sports. I put a lot of, at the beginning of university, you're living by yourself, you're young and you want to have fun. So you go drinking and parties. And I just realized, and just to all these kind of get-togethers, and I just realized in the second year of university when I was like, oh shit, like this is actually tough, right? Like instead of pouring it, like I took that energy and took the time that we spent on, get-togethers and stuff like that, and poured that, like, let's say into sports, into actually, hanging out with friends, going to a restaurant instead of, going to a bar, and just poured all of that frustration, I'd say, into more like energy building activities instead of energy draining activities, because a hangover, as everyone knows, is energy draining.
Absolutely.
And it just taught me to, like, on the one hand, resilience, just, like powering through. But on the other hand, also, finding that a healthy balance between the stress and dealing with the stress.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, you persevered, at least you stuck it out. And I think your father was right. I too have a, similar experience with regards to, you think your grades are the be all and end all.
Yeah.
But they're really not. I mean, if you can actually deliver through action rather than just theory, I think you're always going to be favored. And I think that speaks for entrepreneurs that just go getters and they do stuff, right? So
absolutely. Like, I think it was a blessing in disguise, because at the beginning, like, I mean, I'm running a fintech company, right? So I did have a knack for finance from the beginning. I really enjoyed it. When I left university, I went to Rocket Internet, I went to Food Panda, and did finance. Actually, I was but this was like startup finance, right? Like getting the restaurants to pay. No, sorry, paying the restaurants, getting the customers to pay, dealing with all the operational, cash flows and etc. So I did always have a knack for this, but if I would have gotten really good grades from the beginning, I probably would have gone to an investment bank. I wouldn't be talking to you. And I don't think I would have been that happy in an investment bank compared to the, founding companies doing stuff in a grassroots way. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, from my experience, I believe that when you get such good grades, you're almost like pretty set to go on a path. And often those people might go on a particular ladder, like you were saying, an investment bank, when you just climb up the ladder and so on, which is great. But when you don't get so good grades, let's say, or get what you would like to, you have to go down the slightly harder route, which is where you have to get a bit more creative, imaginative, and sort of sometimes create your own path, which is what many entrepreneurs do, because you have it in your head that if you don't have these top grades, you can't go to top places. That was my experience anyway. I mean, my grades were okay. They weren't phenomenal, but they weren't bad. But my mindset was like, if you don't have a top university degree, then you're never going to get a great job. So I sort of created my own path and created my own business through imagination and having to really think on your own feet.
Yeah, exactly.
What was your first job, Daniel?
So my first full-time job is I went to Rocket Internet and at Food Panda. So I went back to Hong Kong. It was a very, actually I had a job before that, but it was more of a project thing. So the one where I was a little bit longer was, like I said, Food Panda in Hong Kong. I went to Rocket Internet. I was actually waiting for my master's because that project ended. So a friend of mine who I still do quite a lot of business with, but he was working at Food Panda in Hong Kong, and he worked at as an interim MD, right? So what happened was he found out in the second week or something that finance was a complete nightmare. So what he did was he called me up and was like, "Hey, Daniel, can you do finance?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I can do finance." And he said, "When can you come?" I said, "Well, maybe this afternoon." He's like, "Yeah, maybe come tomorrow." And then I started doing finance, and we again, operational finance. I wasn't calculating any crazy ratios or anything, but we were paying restaurants. We were, getting the cash flows right. We were doing the monthly reporting to Germany. It was fantastic. It was a great learning experience. I stuck there for a year. We did, how startups, if you're a founder, the number one worry you have is your cash. Like, when will I be able to pay my salary, the next few salaries? And this was that's 50% of your job as a founder, right? But at Food Panda, we were able to, concentrate on the other 50%, which was because money was not an issue. Hong Kong was a focus market. We said, okay, we need this and this much cash. They wouldn't send it to us. They would ask us a few questions why we need it, and then they would send it.
Okay, cool. So your first your full-time job was Food Panda. I mean, not long or just after that, you founded Wundertax. So I'm really curious about that moment. I mean, firstly, was the entrepreneurial mind always within you, or do you feel like you sort of just became an entrepreneur within those few moments?
That is a very, very interesting question that could fill a whole podcast, I'd say. But I do think that, I had the spark, the interest, not the spark, the interest from the very beginning. I was always interested in tech. I was always interested in innovation and, what startups could do. From secondary school, I did follow these tech innovations, right? I always found it very, very interesting, but there wasn't really a conscious thought to start a tech startup, at the beginning of my studies, I thought okay, I'd like to do the whole going to Asia because I also speak Chinese, using that, follow a similar path to my father, or, the banking stuff was always very interesting. But once I worked at Food Panda, at Rocket Internet, which was, in Berlin, at least it's known as, the startup school. There are lots of entrepreneurs that, after graduating, I'm even saying, after working at Rocket Internet, that started their own businesses. I was, enthralled by it was so, addicting, the whole energy of the whole journey. Our prerogative was growth, right? They told us, you guys have to grow. Hong Kong is one of the key markets. Hire riders, get entrepreneurial about it. Hey, buy scooters if you have to. etc. And we just, like, we were young, we had energy, we were working our asses off because it was just so much fun. Nobody was exactly, driven by any extrinsic, by salaries, or nobody had shares or anything, right? Like, it was just so addictive to see those numbers go up, those orders go up, those the NPS scores go up, the delivery times going down, and we just, we built models, we automated stuff with Excel, and it was addicting. And that was, I think, really the point where I was like, okay, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, there's something to be said with that. So that really, you really saw your work come to fruition, and seeing it happen. And as you say, you weren't even thinking about the salary, the shares and stuff like that. You were just really enjoying it. And that comes down to, really believing in the product or the service.
We were fixing stuff, right? We were always confronted with problems, which I think every entrepreneur that might be listening can really relate to. We always had something, catching fire. It was interesting because once I started, Wundertax myself, like, having that realization, okay, so there's always one big fire which is cash, which is, like, how am I going to pay my employees down the line? Having that, not having to worry about that and fully concentrating on operational stuff, that was very interesting. But once I started with Wundertax, of course, like, that reality caught up.
Mm-hmm. So you founded Wundertax in 2015 and it was fully live in 2016.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of people think about starting a business and then they quickly forget about that idea. Mm-hmm. So it does really take some sort of driver, whatever that may be, to actually say, you know what, I'm actually going to do this. Mm-hmm. So what was it for you that made you think, I'm really going to turn this into a reality?
So I went to Berlin because Berlin was like the startup hub, and I started at this company. They were doing marketing tech. I had the role of, like, in-house entrepreneur. It was really great. It was really, really fun. Problem about it was that, it was an established company, so there wasn't exactly a lot of that same hands in the dirt kind of momentum. So how it started for us was my classmate from university, David. We sat together. He told me, "Hey, I have this idea with taxes. Like, in Germany, there's this tax credit that students can get, which, oddly enough, can be worth thousands of euros once you start in tax refund once you start working. And oddly enough, nobody knew about it. There were a few, like, insurance companies, insurance brokers who tried to, do seminars and told all the students that you can do it, but not how to do it. So we were like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Let's build something, right? Like, and what happened was it went viral. It went absolutely viral, and the tool was absolute shite. It was, like, you could, in theory, hand in your tax return, and a lot of people did, but it wasn't exactly good user experience. It wasn't, it didn't cover all cases. It didn't have errors, right? You still had, like, a legitimate tax return that you could hand in, but it was really just like, if you had any capital gains, if you had any tax, investments, if you had any, if you were married, or if you had a property, whatever, like just common things, like, you couldn't do it with us. But it went viral. We shared it in a few Facebook student groups, and it was just like, boom, they all shared it. And we really hit this pain point that people felt very, very apparently. So we were just like, hey, we're on to something. And that's when we both quit our jobs. We did this. We started doing it full time. We did the plunge. It's very much easier to say, I have to add to that. It's very much easier to say to just quit your job and do it if you don't have responsibilities, and to be fair, also a bit of a financial backing from home. Like, it is very much easier to take the plunge. Having said that, though, I'm a big fan of the lean startup method, right? I don't think anyone should quit their job. And for those that are listening and considering starting up, don't quit your job and build for a year, and live off your savings. Like, that's not going to work. You might be lucky, and like after a year, you have that crazy product that you want to, that people are going to buy. But like most of the times that doesn't work. Rather, do it like, and this is something I recommend to every budding entrepreneur, like look up the lean startup method, build an MVP, right? Build, measure, learn. Build, and then look at if the customers liked it, learn from it, and iterate on it, right? And stumble your way to a product that people actually want, right? That's what we were very lucky that people were immediately, like, oh, wow, taxes can be easy kind of way. But we could have sat down and like just built and built and built and built until we had the perfect tax product, right? But we didn't. We launched this shitty user interface. There's I forgot who said this, but like, if you're not ashamed of your product, of your first product, you're launched too late.
Yeah.
And that's what I would recommend everyone to do. If you have an idea, spend the minimal amount you can on it. You can to make it work, a minimum viable product, right? And see if people buy it. And don't ask your friends, would you buy it? Ask your friends to buy it. And if they're like, because friends will always give you feedback. Oh, this is cool, blah, blah, blah. But if you're like, hey, but would you, like take out your credit card right now and pay me 30 euros for this? They would be like, maybe not, right? Like try to find a minimum product where people will, a viable product, that's important, that will actually pay. And once you get traction, then quit your day job.
Yeah. That was so well. Go on.
Sorry?
You go on, you finish.
Yes. And if people say I don't have time for that, yes, you do. Take out that weekend. It doesn't take more than that. Nowadays, there's so many AI tools. There's so many DIY tech tools. You can throw together a website within 2 hours. Trust me, it will look way better than whatever we built in the beginning.
Yes, very true. I was going to say that was so well put. I couldn't agree more. If you look at, two types of companies, company A and company B, company A spends 3 years trying to perfect the perfect product, whereas you could get started within 6 months. You've got 2.5 years of trial and error, like get the feedback from the customer. They're not liking this, so improve that and this and that. Next thing you know, you've been in the market 2.5 years longer than they already have. Yeah, you might not have the perfect product, but you've probably still been making some money. And by the time you reach the 3rd year, your product would probably be better than the person that spent 3 years.
Made money.
Yes. Procrastinate.
And the thing is, like, people are always like afraid, but like it's called next feature fallacy. Next feature fallacy, because people will always be like, oh, we need to build this and then customers will come. I think the important thing is also to like realize at some point that it probably won't work, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe your market's not large enough. Maybe your approach is not the right one to tackle this problem. You said it very well. You couldn't build 3 years through your own ideas, through your own vision, right? And after the 3 years, you might have a perfect product for you. But once you start trying to sell it, people are like, But if you spend, let's say, 3 months on your MVP and iterate on the customer feedback, right? It might not be the perfect product. You might have customers. We had this even now, like we had this like 2 months ago where an angry customer was at our office and was like, I want my money back. And we're like, but why? He was angry and we were like, oh, well, he was like, oh, it's all wrong. And then we were like, okay, maybe we can like sit through it. We gave him the money. We gave him a refund, but it was great customer feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't ask for any better.
You've earned money. You've also earned money. You were able to pay your bills. And negative feedback is much better from customers than like your friends telling you, oh, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn more from the trials and the tribulations, the setbacks, most definitely.
Yeah. So my girlfriend is an urban planner, and she studied architecture as well before that. And it's very much the case that like there are lots of jobs where you have to be a perfectionist. Yeah, you can't build building a skyscraper on this lean startup method. Don't get me wrong here, right? It's not one size fits all. But and it's very interesting because they are complete reverse. They're like perfectionists, right? They want to build the perfect building. Everything has to be, set and done, and project boom, full stop, period under it, and then it's finished. You're not going to touch it again. It's very interesting when we have these debates because I always say, perfect is the enemy of done, and I think that's like the start or the entrepreneur's mission to be like, okay, what is done, right? You're never going to reach perfection, or else companies wouldn't exist, right? But because or continuous work wouldn't exist. But like, what is done?
Yeah, I like that. Get it done. Okay, so yeah, right. So when you started Wundertax in 2016, talk to me about the first year. What did you run into that you did not expect about entrepreneurship in your first year?
What I didn't expect, I think what I lost a lot was, naivete. I think a lot of the founders or because I was a first-time founder as well, like, it was, and naive, young and naive, right? And I did feel like a lot of the times you're like, okay, which comes back to the first point, right? Like you were like, okay, this feature, customers are going to love it. They all told me this feature is the one that needs to get out the gates, and then you launch it and then nobody's using it. And you have to constrain your optimism, right? Like as founders or people that start founding companies, they do have that sense of boundless optimism, right? A lot of entrepreneurs do. But you do have to bridle that. There are a lot of trials and tribulations where you're like, okay, this must work, right? And then it doesn't. And I think a lot of things are taken easy. One of the hardest things in the world of company building is HR, is building a team, building up a culture. Super underrated, super not talked about enough because we're still dealing with, these bunch of ragtag people that don't actually know each other trying to build a product together, right? And I think that is very, very interesting. That whole, how do I organize these teams? How do I motivate these teams? This was extremely, it brought a lot more challenges than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've been going now for 7 years, you said, right?
Well, yes and no. The company has been.
7 or 8 years.
The company has. I haven't.
Okay, right. What have you done right for the business to have been going for 8 years?
Okay, so maybe to go back one step, I actually left the company after 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay.
I left Wundertax after 2 years. Essentially, me and my co-founder, we had different visions where it's going to go. So I think was also a big trial and tribulation. At the end of the day, we had VC funding, we had an investor on board. They wanted to go full steam ahead, and I also wanted to go full steam ahead. My co-founder was a bit more conservative than that, so it wasn't at the end, it wasn't a great working relationship, but I think it was great that we had these investors on board because they were always very fair and very, very objective. So we had, so I left the company. I kept the shares that I invested. We all, shook hands. We all left on a good note. And I started a co-working space in Berlin. So that was pretty insane because we had to renovate 11,000 square meters. And at the same time, service the customers that were already in there. We had to rent out, so we had to do sales, we had to do financing, blah, blah, blah. It was a whole thing. And then I went to Amsterdam. I moved to the Netherlands, where I joined an ex-colleague from Foodpanda to build up Scan Movers, which is a moving platform. And I did that for 4 years. COVID came. So we also, like moving in the Netherlands kind of, went down a bit. So like, on the ground moving house. So we actually like looked into what we can. So we got very entrepreneurial here, how we should, expand. And we started buying up companies with the help of our investors that we had. So the short version is that was cool. I learned a lot. Did finance again, so that's a recurring theme. But then I said, like, I want to go back into the entrepreneurial hustle. I want to do the whole, organic growth with marketing, with blah, 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 with founding companies. So I actually did a bunch of interim jobs. I did a bunch of consulting and marketing and growth. And I talked to my old investors again from Wundertax. And my co-founder back then, he was out of the company as well for his own reasons. And the new MD, he resigned until the end of 2021. But he was very much like, growth is not that important. Data protection is the most important thing. We were 100% compliant, but, they were just, he was very, very much on the, everything has to be 150% compliant. So stuff like, the password manager was hosted by us and blah, blah, blah. So actually, like, I came back into the beginning of 2022 to Wundertax. So it was a bit of an unconventional ride. And from last year onwards, I brought the band back together as well. I took our head of online marketing, brought him back to the company. He's CMO now. Back another guy who was senior engineer, I brought him back to do CTO, to be CTO. And we have been scaling, cleaning up the company. We've been, decluttering it since 2022. Decluttering it, like getting rid of unnecessary software stuff. KYC, for instance, was a home-built solution. So we actually outsourced this to like a AI-powered, ML-powered KYC service provider. We restructured the team. So going back to the HR thing, how do we motivate people? And we actually invested a lot into new marketing channels. So we did a lot of Reddit, we did a lot of Snapchat, we did a lot of TikTok marketing. And this year, we've actually, even though we're only on the 5th of October now, we've actually already achieved 2023 being the best year of all time.
Brilliant.
So we're very, very happy about that. And we're profitable, which is in the past was very unattractive, but now it's, it's the new black. Be profitable. So we achieved that. And going back to your question, more things that you did right than wrong. I would say listening to customer needs is something we were quite good at. We always built stuff based on customer feedback. Of course, like I said earlier, there were also times when it's like, well, every customer told us that they want this, but now nobody's buying it. But that worked out more often well than not. We also had this, so I have this principle of, decluttering when it comes to management. Or tech for that matter. So we had a lot of these open topics, like what I just said with the KYC. We had stuff like just a lot of unnecessary overhead, such as like we had our own office, which was way too large. And we had this one employee who was actually a product manager, but he was also ordering toilet paper. So this typical early stage startup problem, but it shouldn't be for our stage, right?
Yes.
We're a profitable company. We're growing. So we have the budget for it. So we actually moved into a serviced office right now. Actually, the one that I founded after Wundertax, Scaling Spaces in Berlin. And, I believe in focusing on the essentials, right? We are a tax company. Why the hell are we running a KYC tool to validate our customers? That doesn't make sense. Like we shouldn't be building that. We should be building tax software. And it's the same thing with, user management. So we from the very beginning, we were saying like, okay, let's buy a software that does it better than what we can build. Because nowadays, like if you want to build a homegrown solution for a problem that you have internally, then it must be very specific for you to not buy it from somebody else. Does that make sense? So that's what we did. I think we were very good at that, to declutter. I think our management team is very aligned on that. I think KYC is the best example because our KYC was slow. It was shit. Our customer service agents hated it and they had to do it manually, and it didn't improve. And now we've got, like a third party provider from the UK, which automated 90% of that work. That was a 40 hours a week type of work. That's gone. That's completely automated.
Huge.
It is expensive. But just the efficiency gain that we have by not having our customer service people doing a brain dead job of validating, that's huge.
I'm totally with you on that. I mean, some people can be short-sighted and think, it's a lot of money, but now think about the time you've now freed up so that you can do other things that then it looks cheap, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I always say.
Money. We earn money off of tax software. We don't earn money off of validating.
No. So yeah, it's money well spent if you look at the bigger picture. All right. Absolutely. So you've had your best year. You're profitable, and you're growing. How have you found hiring with that in the growing phase?
Hiring in the growing phase was very, it is always a challenge, right? Because investors always tell you hire the best you can find. But the thing is, the absolute best in their field, they go to the big ones. And we were a scrappy startup. We just had our small little funding round, and getting the best of the best is really not that easy, right? But I do believe that there's a big difference between hiring the best of the best and hiring the best for your company, right? For instance, right now at our company, we have a lot of people that are driven by different things, right? Like at the beginning of the startup, when you're just going up, you can hire young people straight out of university that will do like they did with us with Food Panda, right? Like that were, that just wanted the learning experience, that will, pour their heart into this work for the thrill, for the learning experience, But now we're at a stage of the company where we have, people that are more settled, that are, have also families, and they are motivated by different things. They're very good at what they do, but their motivation is a completely different one, right? They want to earn money. I mean, we all kind of do, but it's important for them to have a stable job with a good salary because they have, their own lives to deal with, and they don't necessarily want to become entrepreneurs themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a different type of person. As a founder, having the foresight and having the empathy to relate to these people, what their actual motivations that is, I think, very important. And that is, I think, one of the most challenging things in hiring. How do I build a culture that is inclusive of these different motivations? How do I attract these people to actually, how do I attract and find out what the skill sets are that we need and what this candidate can offer, et cetera, right? And I think that is also, going back to our the first founding story is, of course, also that the fact that you were a first-time founder, right? You don't know what you don't know. And we did a lot of missteps on hiring, absolutely. Not necessarily because they weren't competent, but because they didn't fit into the stage of the company, into the culture of the company. So in the last 2 years, we found hiring very easy, actually. I'm not going to lie. It was much, much easier than in our growing stage because we're a profitable company. We're growing well. But we knew this, right? We didn't make any illusions that we would be, the next unicorn or anything. But we have a nice company. We're growing very well. And we knew what we were, and we were able to communicate this to the potential candidates. And we were able to, every offer that we wrote in the last year, and we hired about 7 people, I think, 7 or 8. Every offer we wrote, was accepted by the candidate, which we're very proud of. And I think what contributed to that was the self-awareness of what we are and what we can offer and what we want. And the other thing, what was very important, I would say, is we are a very diverse team as well. So, me having a background in Hong Kong, our CTO being Syrian, our CMO having a Peruvian, he grew up in Peru. The team itself, very diverse in all the different aspects that you can think of. So, race, sex, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And the last 7 people that we hired were all women as well.
Oh wow!
I think that is very important. It is a very acute topic that you hear about a lot recently, and it's a very controversial topic. But let me tell anybody that is listening, it is a candidate looks at your company and looks at your LinkedIn and sees, okay, those are faces that look like me. I want to. It's not even conscious; it's subconscious that they were like, okay, I want to join this company because like they seem like I can like a company I can relate to, and we were very fortunate to have. I don't know. It was from the beginning, like in our DNA, kind of like my co-founder back then. He had Polish background as well, so we were always kind of a diverse team, and like I said, eight offers written, 8 accepted, and we're very proud of that.
As you should be. So, what are the long-term goals now then for Wundertax? You've had a great year. Talk to me about the ambitions and how far do you want to take it?
We want to become the tax tool in Germany. In Germany, taxes are just a nightmare, and the government digitalization in Germany isn't exactly a priority topic. So we as private company, as a startup, we step in and, we built these tools and customers love it. And our ambition is, in Germany, it makes sense for everyone or almost everyone to hand in a tax return because you almost always get a refund. And the people that are not handing in their tax returns right now, those are about 10 million people, are the ones that actually need it the most. Just think of, if you're extremely wealthy, you can hire a tax advisor who gets out every single little, tax loophole for you. And then you get a huge refund back. But people who, like nurses and construction workers, or just even your average sales employee, like they don't do their taxes because they don't think they get anything back, right? And those are normally the people that need it the most, right. Not the people that earn big bucks from the get-go. So we really want to get that financial, idea into the minds of the people. We want to expand our business. I think we're doing a huge service for people. Our tool costs 35 euros, but people, get on average about 1,000 euros back. Let it be 500, it's still a huge profit.
Yeah, massive.
For people that need it. So I believe like we're doing something good. We're doing something good for, like financial literacy as well. And we want to expand. We want to go big with this. I think Germany is a large enough market. We just launched our tool for pensioners, for people, for retirees. It's challenging. It's challenging because they don't, if you're not a digital native, and the UX can be a bit confusing. So that brings a lot of own challenges, but I think our long-term vision is to be the tax tool in Germany, to expand that, to bring that to more people.
Excellent. So last question then. As we mentioned, there's going to be lots of people listening that are perhaps thinking about starting up their own business. And you've had quite the journey, starting a business, then coming away and coming back. What's the one bit of advice you would give to someone that's perhaps listening to this thinking, yeah, I'm in that position where I want to start a business, but I'm just on the fence right now?
People that want to start a business but on the fence. I would I guess there's a big emotional, challenge with founding companies. I would I'm a bit more of a, risk-friendly person, to put it that way. I always tell myself, what's the worst that can happen, right? If you want to take the plunge, if you're on the fence of founding a company, more often than not, I would say go for it. Because, obviously you shouldn't end up on the street or anything, but if you have a bit of savings and you want to take a year off and start your company, you should do it. You should do it if you believe in the idea. If you went through the steps of the MVP that I said to you. Because what's the worst that can happen? Hey, your savings might have dwindled after a year, but you will always regret not having taken that shot. My dad does. Take the plunge. My father, for instance, regrets it, that he didn't start up his own thing when he had the idea, when he had the chance, because he loved he did love his corporate job. He did thoroughly enjoy it, but he does ask himself, what would have been if? Yeah. What could have been? And I do believe that a lot of those people that don't take the plunge because of emotional reasons, because on a rational financial level, again, what's the worst that can happen, right? Maybe don't pour your life savings into it, and you have to know when to stop, because your idea is not that great, because the market doesn't want it. But at the end of the day, you can still go back to the corporate job. You can still start applying again. There's the fear of not doing it and regretting it is larger than the risk. In most cases, I would say.
Could not agree more. So and with regards to when I try and think about my situation, I first started my own business when I was 23. I'm 30 now. If I hadn't have done that, I would definitely. If I was looking at it now, I'd definitely be in huge regret, for sure. Yeah. I've learned more in the last 7 years than I did in the previous 23.
Yeah, it's you're always challenged, of course. It's also my or our, I'd say, boundless optimism. Just do it, kind of way. But I have a lot of friends that I was oh yeah, I'd like to be an entrepreneur. I'd like to do it, and then they list 5 reasons that are just, them trying to find reasons, right? And then at the end of the day, I also tell them, maybe you shouldn't be an entrepreneur because, if you can find 5 reasons to not do it, you just need one reason to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me on the Startup Stories podcast. Thoroughly enjoyed that. What an interesting journey, all the ups and downs, and the return of you back at Wundertax. Looking forward to following your journey from afar, to be fair, and seeing the progress that you've made after, such a great year, and seeing that you're profitable now. So, can't thank you enough. Thank you, Daniel.
Hey, Jordan, this was really fun. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to this episode of Startup Stories. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our guests and learning more about their journey in the startup world. Of course, we'll be back soon with another exciting episode featuring a new guest. So make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and additional content. And lastly, if you have any suggestions for guests or topics you'd like to hear about, then let me know. All feedback is appreciated. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.